I drove 6 hours just to spend one night at home, but the moment I set my suitcase down, my mother delivered the sentence that proved I never had a standing here. She told me to sleep on the sofa because my cousin needed my room. I nodded, smiled, and walked right back out the door. 48 hours later, I discovered the secret they had been hiding in the very space they stole from me. My name is Tessa Hollis, and for the last 8 years, I have made a living by finding the things people desperately try to hide. I work as a lead investigator for Harbor Point Forensics Group, a firm in Boston that specializes in financial compliance and fraud. My job is to look at a spreadsheet of perfectly balanced numbers and find the one single decimal point that suggests $1 million has been siphoned off to an offshore account. I am paid to be suspicious. I am paid to notice when the story does not match the evidence. Yet, as I drove the 6 hours from Boston to New Haven, Connecticut, I turned that part of my brain off. I wanted to be a daughter, not an investigator. I wanted to believe that the invitation from my parents, Lorraine and Grant Hollis, was a genuine olive branch and not just another summons to an emotional tribunal where I would inevitably be found lacking. I had packed with the precision of a woman armoring herself for battle, though I told myself it was just a weekend visit. In my trunk sat a case of vintage Cabernet that cost nearly $400, a peace offering for my father, and a cashmere wrap for my mother that I had spent my lunch break tracking down. I was 34 years old. I owned my own condo in the Back Bay. I had a 401k that was fully vested and a fiancé, Cole, who actually listened when I spoke. But as I pulled into the driveway of the colonial house where I grew up, I felt that familiar, suffocating regression. I was suddenly 12 years old again, bracing for impact. The house looked immaculate. My parents prided themselves on appearances. The lawn was manicured to within an inch of its life, and the shutters were painted a fresh, stark black. It was the picture of the respectable, upper-middle-class American dream. But I knew the foundation was cracked. I parked my Audi next to a beat-up Honda Civic that I recognized immediately. Madison. My cousin Madison Vale was exactly my age, born 3 months after me. Yet she had remained in a perpetual state of arrested development that my family found endearing rather than exhausting. While I was pulling all-nighters to finish my master's degree, Madison was finding herself in Europe on my uncle's dime. While I was securing my first promotion at Harbor Point, Madison was getting married to a man she had known for 6 weeks. And now, seeing her car, I knew exactly what was happening. The prodigal daughter, or niece, in this case, had returned, and the responsible one was about to pay the bill. I took a breath, grabbed my suitcase and the heavy box of wine, and walked to the front door. I did not even have to knock. My mother, Lorraine, opened it before I reached the step. She looked frantic, her hair perfectly coiffed but her eyes darting around as if she were managing a crisis center rather than a home. "Tessa, you made it," she said, offering me a cheek to kiss. She did not look at the wine. She did not look at me. She was looking past me, toward the living room. "Hi, Mom," I said, stepping inside. The air in the house was stiflingly warm. I brought the wine Dad likes. "That is nice, dear. Put it in the kitchen," she said, already moving away. "We have a situation. Madison is here." I paused, the heavy box still in my arms. I saw her car. "Is she okay?" "She is going through a terrible time. Tessa," my mother whispered. Though there was nobody else in the entryway, she and her husband are separated again. She is devastated. She needs family right now. She needs support. I tightened my grip on the wine crate. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said, and I meant it, mostly. I did not hate Madison, but I hated the gravitational pull she exerted on my parents. I walked into the kitchen, set the wine down on the granite island, and turned to find my father, Grant, standing there. He was pouring himself a scotch, his back to me. "Hello, Dad," I said. He turned, swirling the amber liquid. "Tessa, good drive?" "Fine. 6 hours. Traffic on 95 was a nightmare," I said. He nodded, uninterested in the logistics of my life. "Your cousin is upstairs. Keep your voice down." She finally fell asleep. I felt a prickle of irritation. I had just driven half a day to see them, and my arrival was being treated like a noise violation. I understand, I said, keeping my voice level. I will just take my bags up to my room and freshen up before dinner. There was a pause. It was a small beat of silence, lasting no more than 2 seconds. But in my line of work, that is a tell. My father took a sip of his drink. My mother appeared in the doorway, wringing her hands together. Actually, Tessa, my mother began, her voice taking on that sickeningly sweet tone she used when she was asking for something unreasonable. About the room, we had to make some adjustments. Adjustments? I asked. Madison is in your room, she said. I blinked. Okay, so I will take the guest room? My mother's smile faltered. Well, the guest room is full of your father's golf equipment and the boxes from the attic we are sorting through. There is really no space in there to walk, let alone sleep. I stared at them. The math was simple. 3 bedrooms, 1 for them, 1 for me, 1 guest room. If Madison was in mine, and the guest room was a storage locker, then where was I supposed to go? So where am I sleeping? I asked, though I already felt the cold creep of realization up my spine. My mother gestured vaguely toward the living room. The sofa is very comfortable. Tessa, it is just for a night or 2. Madison needs the bed. She is fragile right now. She needs her rest. The sofa, the beige, L-shaped sectional that was 15 years old and smelled faintly of lemon pledge and dust. I looked at my mother, waiting for the punchline. I was 34. I was a professional woman who had just driven across 3 states to bring them $400 worth of wine, and I was being told to camp in the living room like a college kid crashing after a party. You want me to sleep on the couch, I repeated, ensuring there was no misunderstanding. So my cousin, who is a grown woman, can have my bedroom? She is going through a divorce. Tessa, my father snapped, his patience evaporating. Where is your compassion? You are tough. You can handle a little discomfort. Madison is sensitive. She needs the stability of a real room right now. There it was, the sentence that had defined my entire life in this house. You are strong. You can handle it. It sounded like a compliment, but it was a weapon. It was the excuse they used to neglect me while pouring all their resources into anyone who cried loud enough, because I did not break. They assumed I did not need fixing. They assumed I did not need anything at all. I took a deep breath, fighting the urge to scream. Fine, I said. I will just go upstairs and get my toiletries out of my bag. I assume my bag can go in the room. Or does Madison's luggage need the floor space too? Just be quiet, my mother hissed. Do not wake her. I walked up the stairs, my hand gripping the banister so hard my knuckles turned white. The hallway was dimly lit. I approached the door to my old bedroom, the room I had grown up in, the room that was supposed to be my sanctuary when I came home. The door was ajar. I pushed it open gently. Madison was indeed asleep, sprawled across the queen-sized bed, face down in the pillows I had bought for this room 2 Christmases ago. But it was not Madison that made my stomach drop. It was the hallway. Stacked against the wall, haphazardly shoved aside, were 3 plastic bins, my bins. These were the boxes I kept in the closet, filled with the things I could not bear to bring to Boston, but could not bear to throw away. My high school yearbooks, my college diplomas, the small cedar box containing the few letters my grandmother had written to me before she passed. The lid of the top bin was cracked. The tape I had meticulously sealed it with was sliced open. I stepped closer, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was not just displacement. This was a search. I knelt down. The cedar box was sitting on top of a pile of old sweaters, not inside the bin where I always kept it. The latch was undone. I flipped it open. It was empty. The letters were there, shuffled, but the small velvet pouch that held my grandmother's vintage pearl brooch, the one she promised me, the one I kept here for safekeeping because I was terrified of losing it in the city, was gone. I stood up, a cold clarity washing over me. I looked into the room one last time. I saw Madison's purse on the nightstand. Next to it was a stack of papers that looked disturbingly like bank statements, but I could not see the names from the doorway. I turned around and walked back downstairs. I did not try to be quiet. My heels clicked sharply against the hardwood. My parents were in the kitchen. My mother was arranging crackers on a plate, as if we were having a lovely tea party. "Why are my boxes in the hallway?" I asked. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "And why have they been opened?" My mother didn't look up. "Oh, Madison was just looking for some extra blankets. She probably just moved things around. Do not be so dramatic. Tessa." She opened my grandmother's keepsake box. "Mom, the pearl brooch is gone." My father slammed his glass down. "Enough," he shouted. "You come in here, accusing your family of stealing before you have even taken off your coat? Madison probably moved it for safekeeping so it would not get lost while she was settling in. You are being petty." Petty. I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw two people who had decided a long time ago that my role in this family was to be the fuel that kept everyone else warm. I was the resource. I was the backup plan. I was the sofa. "I have a question," I said, "and I want you to answer it honestly. Am I a guest in this house, or am I your daughter?" The room went silent. The refrigerator hummed. My mother looked at the cheese plate. My father looked at his scotch. Neither of them looked at me. Neither of them spoke. The silence stretched out, thick and heavy, lasting 5 seconds, then 10. "That is what I thought," I said. I turned on my heel. I walked to the entryway, grabbed the handle of my suitcase, and opened the front door. "Where are you going?" my mother called out, her voice finally tinged with panic. Not because I was leaving, but because of how it would look to the neighbors. "Tessa, do not be ridiculous. Dinner is in an hour." I walked out to my car. The evening air was biting, cold enough to see my breath. I popped the trunk, heaved my suitcase inside, and got into the driver's seat. I did not look back at the house. I did not look at the window of my old room to see if Madison was watching. I reversed out of the driveway. My hands were shaking, not from sadness, but from the adrenaline of a severed limb. I typed the name of the nearest Marriott into my GPS. I was checking out, not just of the house, but of the contract I had signed at birth that said I had to set myself on fire to keep them comfortable. I drove 3 miles to the downtown hotel. The lobby was sterile and smelled of industrial cleaner, a scent I infinitely preferred to the lies of my childhood home. I approached the front desk, slapped my credit card down, and booked a suite for 2 nights. I got into the elevator, the silence wrapping around me like a shield. I swiped the key card, entered the room, and sat on the edge of the bed. It was firm. It was mine. My phone buzzed on the nightstand. I picked it up, expecting a guilt-tripping text from my mother or a furious voicemail from my father. It was neither. It was a security notification from my primary email provider, the old account I hadn't used for business in years, but the one that was linked to every major personal account I had: my bank, my retirement fund, my cloud storage. Alert: suspicious sign-in attempt detected. Location: New Haven. CT. Method: account recovery via trusted number. I stared at the screen. The trusted number listed for that old account was the landline at my parents' house, a number no one used anymore, a number that required someone to be physically standing in the kitchen, holding the receiver, listening for the verification code. I looked at the timestamp. 3 minutes ago. I had been in the car 3 minutes ago. My parents were in the kitchen arguing about me 3 minutes ago. That meant the person holding the phone wasn't my mother, and it wasn't my father. I thought of the figure asleep in my bed. I thought of the separated cousin who needed rest. I sat there in the hotel room, the glow of the phone illuminating my face. The tears I had been holding back evaporated instantly, replaced by the cold, hard focus of the investigator. They thought they had kicked me out to a sofa. They had no idea they had just handed me a case. The glow of my laptop screen was the only light in the hotel room. I had stripped off my coat and kicked off my heels, but I could not bring myself to change into pajamas. Pajamas were for sleep, and I was not going to sleep. I was going to work. I dialed Cole. He answered on the first ring, his voice thick with the grogginess of sleep, as it was nearly 11 at night back in Boston. "Tessa?" Is everything okay? You sounded short in your text. I am at the Marriott downtown, I said, skipping the pleasantries. I left. There was a rustling sound on the line as he sat up. Talk to me. Did they say something? They moved Madison into my room. Cole, not just into the room, but into my life. My bins are in the hall. My grandmother's box was broken into. And 3 minutes after I walked out the door, someone inside that house tried to reset the password to my primary email account using the landline verification code. Cole was silent for a moment. The lawyer in him was booting up, overriding the sleepy fiancé. That is an unauthorized access attempt, he said, his tone sharpening. Did they get in? No, but they tried. And Cole, that email is the skeleton key. It links to my bank, my investment portfolio, and the cloud drive where I keep copies of my personal identification documents. You need to lock it down, Tessa, now. I am doing it as we speak, I said, my fingers flying across the keyboard. But Cole, it gets worse. I am looking at the security activity log. This wasn't the first time. I stared at the list of IP addresses and device types scrolling down my screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. A cold, hard rhythm. What do you mean? Cole asked. I see a successful password recovery attempt from 3 weeks ago. I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. They changed the recovery email address to a generic Gmail account I do not recognize. mvaleestays@gmail.com. M. Vale, Cole repeated. Madison Vale. She has had access for 3 weeks, I said, feeling a wave of nausea. I haven't used this account for active mail in 6 months, so I didn't notice the notification. It went to my spam folder on my phone. Cole, my old room wasn't just a bedroom. It was where I stored my physical archive. The bottom drawer of the desk? It had the hard copies of the trust fund documents Grandma left me, the ones Mom and Dad always claimed were too complicated to finalize. Tessa, listen to me, Cole said, his voice steady and commanding. Do not go back there. Do not bang on the door and demand answers. You are an investigator. Investigate. If you accuse them now, they will shred everything. They will claim you are paranoid. You need clean evidence. You need an audit trail so thick they cannot gaslight their way out of it. You are right, I said. I know you are right. But I need to know if the physical files are still there. I hung up the phone and stared at the device in my hand. I needed to gauge their reaction. I needed to see how well they could lie. I dialed my mother's cell phone. She picked up after 4 rings, sounding breathless and annoyed. Tessa, we are eating dinner. This is incredibly rude. Who was in my desk? Mom? I asked. There was a pause. Too long to be confusion. Too short to be shock. I do not know what you are talking about. My bottom drawer, I said. The lock is scratched, and I know someone moved the files. Was it you, or was it Madison? Oh, for heaven's sake, my mother sighed, the sound crackling with static. Madison was just cleaning up. The room was dusty. Tessa, she wanted to wipe down the drawers before she put her clothes away. She probably just shifted some old papers around. You are being hysterical. She was cleaning the inside of a locked drawer, I asked. The lock has been broken for years. Tessa, stop looking for drama. We will discuss this in the morning when you apologize. She hung up. I lowered the phone. She had just confirmed it. Madison had been in the drawer, and my mother knew. I turned back to my laptop. If they wanted to play games with assets and access, they had forgotten who they were dealing with. I spent my days tracking embezzlers who were far smarter than a suburban couple and their drifting niece. I opened a new browser window and navigated to the Connecticut Business Registry. Then, in a separate tab, I pulled up the New Haven County Land Records portal. These were public databases, accessible to anyone who knew how to query them, but to the average person, they were invisible layers of bureaucracy. First, the house. I punched in my parents' address. The search results populated in seconds. I scanned the history of the deed. Grant and Lorraine Hollis. Owners in fee simple. Nothing unusual there. Then I checked the permits. My mother had mentioned on the phone 2 weeks ago that they were busy with contractors because they were finally redoing the kitchen. She had complained about the cost of granite and the dust. I filtered for permits issued in the last 6 months. No results found. I frowned. You cannot renovate a kitchen in New Haven without a permit for electrical or plumbing. If they were doing it illegally, or they weren't doing it at all. I switched to the lien and mortgage section. There it was, a recording date from 4 weeks ago. Document type: Mortgage Modification Agreement. My parents had not just refinanced, they had pulled equity out. The document showed a cash-out refinance for $85,000. My parents were retired. Their pension was fixed. They had always preached about being debt-free. Why would they drain nearly $100,000 of equity from the house they had almost paid off? And why lie about a kitchen renovation to cover the influx of cash? I minimized that window and went to the Secretary of State's business search. I typed in Madison Vale. No results found. I typed in my father's name. No results found. I went back to the email address I had found in the security logs. M. Vale Stays. I tried searching for variations of that name. Vale Stays, MV Hosting, Hollis Hospitality. Nothing. I sat back, rubbing my temples. I was missing a link. Madison was sloppy, but she wasn't invisible. If she was trying to set up something, she would use an identifier that made her feel important. Then I remembered the notification on my phone again. The method of recovery. The landline. I went back to the county land records and looked at the mortgage modification document again. I zoomed in on the notary block. Sometimes, sloppy clerks scanned the entire package, including the cover sheets. On the third page, in the return to field, which usually listed the bank or the title company, there was a handwritten note that had been crossed out but was still legible. At-N, Juniper Lane Holdings, LLC. I switched tabs to the business registry. I typed in Juniper Lane Holdings, LLC. Status: active. Filing date: 5 weeks ago. I clicked on the filing history to see the articles of organization. My breath hitched. The principal agent was listed as Sarah Miller, a name I didn't know, but the business address? It was my parents' house. And then I looked at the mailing address for the agent. It was a P.O. box in downtown New Haven. But it was the manager section that made my blood run cold. In Connecticut, you have to list the members of an LLC if it is manager-managed. There were 2 names listed. One was Madison Vale. The other was not my parents. It was not me. It was Tessa Hollis. I stared at the screen, the white light burning into my retinas. My name. My name was on a limited liability company I had never heard of, registered 5 weeks ago, with my cousin listed as my partner. I clicked on the PDF of the filing form to see the signatures. There, at the bottom of the page, was a scrawl that looked frighteningly like mine. It had the same loop on the T, the same sharp slant on the H. It was a good forgery. In fact, it was too good. It looked like someone had traced it from a high-quality sample. A sample like the ones found on the trust documents in the bottom drawer of my desk. I sat back in the hotel chair, the silence of the room deafening. Cole was right. I did not owe them my endurance, but I did owe them a reckoning. They hadn't just stolen my room. They were stealing my identity. And they were using the house that was supposed to be my inheritance, the house that my grandmother's money had helped pay for, as the collateral to fund it. I took a screenshot of the document, then I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Case File, Hollis. I was not just checking out of their house, I was checking into the investigation of my life. The morning sun hit the vinyl siding of my parents' house, making the pristine white surface gleam with a deception of domestic peace. To the neighbors walking their golden retrievers, this was the Hollis residence, a pillar of the community. To me, sitting in my idling Audi at 10 o'clock in the morning, it was a crime scene where the evidence was currently eating a bagel in my bed. I had spent the night in the hotel building a digital dossier, but digital footprints only tell you what happened, not how. For that, I needed to see the physical interface. I needed to get back into that room. I texted my mother a brief, functional lie. Forgot my old work laptop in the closet. Need it for a file transfer. Coming by to grab it. I did not wait for a reply. I just drove over. When I walked in, the air smelled of brewing coffee and the distinct, cloying scent of Madison's vanilla perfume. It was everywhere, masking the smell of the house I grew up in. Madison was sitting at the kitchen island, wearing a silk robe that I recognized. It was my mother's. "Oh, hey," she said, not bothering to stand up. "Aunt Lorraine said you stormed off to a hotel. That is kind of expensive, isn't it?" "Good morning, Madison," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She took a sip of coffee, her eyes tracking me with a mix of wariness and smugness. "The sofa is actually really comfy. You know, I tried it out this morning before moving back upstairs. I'm just so stressed right now. Tessa, my back is killing me. I really needed the mattress support. You understand, right?" I looked at her. She didn't look stressed. She looked settled. She looked like a parasite that had successfully attached itself to the host and was now explaining why the itch was for my own good. "I am sure it is very hard for you," I said. "I am just going to grab my computer." I headed for the stairs. "Wait," Madison called out, sliding off the stool a little too quickly. "It is a mess up there. I haven't made the bed." "I do not care about the bed, Madison." I walked up the stairs, my senses dialed up to high alert. In my line of work, we call this a site walkthrough. You look for anomalies. You look for things that do not fit the stated function of the room. I pushed open the door to my bedroom. The first thing I noticed was the heat. The room was significantly warmer than the hallway. The second thing I noticed was the hum. It was faint, a low-frequency electronic buzz that most people would tune out, but I had spent enough time in server rooms to recognize the sound of hardware working hard. I scanned the perimeter. My old twin bed was unmade, sheets tangled, but my eyes went to the baseboards, running along the white trim, secured with fresh plastic clips that had been nailed into the wood, was a thick gray cable. It wasn't a standard phone line. It was a Cat6 Ethernet cable, high speed, shielded. It ran from the wall jack behind the dresser, snaked around the room, and disappeared behind the nightstand. Why would a guest who just needs a place to sleep need hardwired industrial-grade internet in a bedroom that already had strong Wi-Fi? I stepped further inside. On the nightstand, next to a half-empty glass of water, sat a sleek black box with blinking blue lights, a mesh Wi-Fi extender, but not the cheap kind you buy at Best Buy. This was enterprise-level gear, the kind used to manage heavy traffic loads. Madison appeared in the doorway, breathless. "I told you it was messy." I walked over to the nightstand, pretending to look for my laptop charger. "I am just looking for my cord," I said. My hand brushed past a stack of papers on the bedside table. On top was a business-sized envelope with the logo of a local credit union. It was face down. As I reached for it, Madison lunged. "That is private," she snapped, snatching the envelope before my fingers could graze the paper. She clutched it to her chest, her eyes wide. It is divorce stuff, lawyer stuff. You do not need to see it." I froze. I had seen enough in that split second. It wasn't a letter from a divorce attorney. The return address window had a red stamp on it that said "Final Notice," and the name peering through the cellophane window wasn't Madison Vale. It looked like Grant Hollis. I backed off, raising my hands. "Relax, Madison. I am not interested in your divorce." I moved toward the closet, where I had claimed my laptop was. I opened the door. The floor of the closet, usually cluttered with my old shoes, was suspiciously clear. Instead, there was a shredder, a heavy-duty cross-cut shredder with a bin that was half full of confetti. I grabbed my old laptop bag from the top shelf, slinging it over my shoulder. "I need to use the bathroom," I said. Before she could object, I slipped into the ensuite bathroom attached to the room. I locked the door and turned on the tap to mask the sound of my movement. I pulled out my phone. I didn't use the bathroom. I scanned the counter. Madison's toiletries were spread out, but shoved into the corner was a small stack of flattened cardboard boxes, tied together with twine, ready for recycling. I leaned in. They were shipping boxes. I snapped 3 rapid photos. The shipping label on the top box was addressed to Hollis Home at my parents' address. But the sender wasn't Amazon or a clothing store. It was a company called Smart Lock Solutions. Smart locks, keypad entries, the kind used for Airbnbs and rental properties so the owner doesn't have to be there to let the guest in. I shifted the boxes slightly. The one underneath was from a linen supply company. Bulk order, 12 sets. Queen, percale white. 12 sets of sheets for one person? I flushed the toilet for effect and washed my hands. When I unlocked the door, Madison was standing right there, hovering like a prison guard. "Find what you needed?" she asked, her voice tight. "Yeah," I said. I walked back into the bedroom. I paused near the bed. I needed one more confirmation. I needed to know where my files were, the ones she claimed she had cleaned around. "Oops," I said, fumbling with my bag strap. I dropped a clip. I crouched down before she could stop me. It was a classic move, clumsy and disarming. From this low angle, I could see under the bed. There were no monsters under there, just plastic storage bins, but not the ones I had packed. These were mine, the ones from the closet, the ones containing my financial history and the hard copies of my grandmother's trust documents. The lid of the nearest bin was slightly askew, and sticking out of the side, jammed between the plastic lip and the box, was a file folder tab. It was blue. I used blue tabs for banking. My parents used manila. That was my file, and it was open. I stood up, dusting off my knees. "Got it," I said, holding up a paperclip I had palmed from my pocket earlier. Madison looked relieved that I hadn't stayed on the floor. "You should probably go," she said. "Uncle Grant is downstairs. He seemed upset you came back." I walked out of the room, my heart pounding a steady, cold rhythm against my ribs. I had the photos. I had the visual confirmation of the network cables. I had the shredder. I had the smart locks. This wasn't a guest room. This was a command center. I descended the stairs and found my father standing in the foyer. He was wearing his golf polo, arms crossed over his chest, blocking the path to the door like a bouncer. "You came back," he said. "It wasn't a question. I just needed my laptop." He looked at the bag on my shoulder, then at my face. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask where I had slept. "You are making a scene." "Tessa," he said, his voice low and rumbling. "Leaving like that last night? Ignoring your mother's calls? We have rules in this family. You do not air dirty laundry. You do not disrespect our hospitality." "Hospitality," I repeated. "Is that what we are calling it?" He took a step closer, using his height to intimidate me, a tactic that had worked when I was 16, but now just made him look like an aging man afraid of losing control. "Madison is going through a hard time. We are helping her. That is what family does. You are so focused on your career, on your money. You have forgotten what it means to help people." I tightened my grip on my laptop bag. The irony was so sharp it almost cut. He was lecturing me on helping people while he and Madison were actively cannibalizing my identity to float a business I knew nothing about. "I haven't forgotten anything." "Dad," I said, looking him dead in the eye, "I know exactly how this family works, and I know the rules." I stepped around him. He didn't move to stop me, but his presence was a heavy weight on my back. "Khan," he said, using the childhood nickname he knew I hated. "Do not push this. You will regret it." I stopped at the door, hand on the brass knob. "I know the rules, Dad," I said softly, "but I also know the laws regarding paperwork and forged signatures." I saw his eyes flicker, just a fraction of a second, a twitch of the eyelid. He knew. He knew about the LLC. He knew about the signature. I walked out. I didn't get into my car immediately. I sat in the driver's seat, locked the doors, and adjusted my rearview mirror. I wasn't leaving yet. I waited. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The front door opened. Madison stepped out. She wasn't wearing the silk robe anymore. She was dressed in jeans and a hoodie, looking nothing like the fragile, stressed woman she had played inside. She was carrying a heavy canvas tote bag over her shoulder. She looked left, then right, checking the driveway. She didn't see me. I was parked down the street, shielded by the neighbor's overgrown hedge, watching through the side mirror. She walked quickly to her Honda. She opened the trunk and threw the bag in. But as she swung it, the top flopped open. It was full of mail, white envelopes, yellow padded packages, and right on top, sliding halfway out, was a thick brown envelope with bold red lettering. I squinted, leaning forward. Notice of default. It was the same kind of envelope I had seen her hide on the nightstand, but this wasn't just one, it was a stack. She slammed the trunk shut, jumped into the driver's seat, and peeled out of the driveway, heading in the opposite direction of the law firm she supposedly needed to visit for her divorce. I started my engine. They weren't just running a business. They were running from a debt so massive it required them to burn my life down to pay for it. And I was going to follow the smoke. My phone had been vibrating on the generic hotel nightstand for the better part of an hour, dancing across the laminate surface like a nervous insect. I had set it to silent, but the buzzing was persistent enough to drill into my skull. I finally picked it up, not to answer, but to witness the autopsy of my relationship with my parents. There were 7 missed calls from my father, 3 from my mother, and a text message from her that had arrived 10 minutes ago. I opened it, bracing myself for an apology I knew would not come. "You are making me ashamed. Tessa, people are watching. The neighbors saw you leave. You are acting like a child throwing a tantrum. Come back before you ruin the weekend." It was classic Lorraine Hollis. No concern for why I had left. No question about where I was sleeping. Just the terrifying prospect that Mrs. Gable next door might have seen my taillights and drawn a conclusion that did not fit the perfect suburban tableau my mother had spent 40 years curating. Then the phone lit up again. Grant Hollis. I stared at the screen. If I didn't answer, they would escalate. They would call Cole. They would call my office. They would create the very scene they claimed to despise. I slid my thumb across the screen. "Hello, Dad." "Tessa," he barked, skipping the greeting. "Get back here, now." "I am not coming back. Dad, I am staying at the Marriott." "You are being ridiculous," he said, his voice dropping to that low, rumbling register he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while being entirely unreasonable. "It is a sofa. Tessa, it is one night. You are making this into a federal case because you are jealous." "Jealous?" I asked, a dry laugh escaping my throat. "Of what? Of Madison sleeping in my bed?" "Of the help we are giving her," he shouted, his composure cracking. "She is family. Family sacrifices for each other. You have a good job. You have a big apartment in the city. You have everything, and you cannot give up a few square feet for a cousin in crisis? Come back. Apologize to your mother for worrying her, and sleep on the couch. It is a small thing." It was always a small thing. I held the phone away from my ear, staring at the ceiling. I remembered my college graduation. They had arrived late because Madison had a crisis with a boyfriend, and they missed my name being called. It is a small thing. "Tessa, we are here now." I remembered when I had emergency appendicitis surgery 3 years ago. I called them from the recovery room. They said they would come down on the weekend because the traffic on a Tuesday was brutal. I spent 3 days alone in the hospital. It is a small thing. "Tessa, you are strong. You handled it." I was the ATM of emotional labor. I was the bank they withdrew patience and understanding from. But whenever I tried to make a withdrawal of support, the account was empty. "It is not about the sofa." "Dad," I said, my voice steady. "Then what is it?" he challenged. "It is about the fact that I am not a guest in that house. I am your daughter, but you treat me like an inconvenienced tenant." "I am not doing this over the phone," he snapped. "If you are not here by dinner, do not bother coming for Christmas." He hung up. The line went dead. I sat there in the silence of the hotel room, the threat of being disowned hanging in the air. A younger version of me would have panicked. A younger version of me would have packed my bag, driven back, apologized for having feelings, and slept on the floor if they asked me to. But the investigator in me was louder than the daughter today. I called Cole. "They are spiraling," I told him, recounting the conversation. "They are terrified I am not there." "Of course they are," Cole said, his voice tinny through the speakerphone as I opened my laptop. "Think about it. Tessa, why do they need you physically in the house? Because they want to control the narrative? Because they need a witness who is complicit," he corrected. "If you are there, sleeping on the couch, eating their food, chatting with Madison, you are normalizing the situation. You are visually signing off on Madison taking over your space. If you are gone, you are a variable they cannot control. And if you are angry, you might start looking too closely at things, like why the house was refinanced, or why there is a shredder in the closet." "They want me back so I do not notice they are robbing me," I said, typing my password into the laptop. "Exactly. They are gaslighting you to cover their tracks. But you are not going back. You are going to dig." I hung up and turned my attention to the screen. I had the name of the LLC from the mortgage documents I had found the night before. Juniper Lane Holdings. It sounded quaint. Harmless. The kind of name you give to a candle shop or a bed and breakfast. I ran a deeper search on the business entity. The registered agent address was indeed my parents' house, but the business classification code was what caught my eye. Real estate rental and leasing. Short-term accommodation. My stomach twisted. Short-term accommodation. I opened a new tab and pulled up the major platforms: Airbnb, Vrbo, Booking.com. I typed in New Haven, Connecticut. I set the filters to private room and superhost. If Madison was running this, she would want the status. She would want the validation. Hundreds of listings popped up. I scrolled through them, my eyes scanning the thumbnails. I saw apartments downtown, spare rooms near Yale, basement suites in East Rock. And then, on page 3, I saw it. My heart actually stopped for a beat. The listing title was sickeningly inviting: The Lavender Suite, Historic Charm and Private Family Home. The thumbnail photo was my bedroom. I clicked on it, my hand shaking slightly on the mouse. There it was, my sanctuary. The walls I had painted a soft, calming gray. The vintage rug I had bought in Morocco. The heavy oak desk that had belonged to my grandfather. But it had been staged. There was a tray with a teapot and 2 cups sitting on the bed. My bed. There were fresh flowers on the nightstand. My nightstand. I read the description. Experience the warmth of a classic New England home. This spacious, sun-drenched room features a queen bed with premium linens, a dedicated workspace for the digital nomad, and high-speed enterprise-grade Wi-Fi. Guests have access to a private bathroom and can enjoy a continental breakfast prepared by the hosts, perfect for professionals or academics visiting the university. Hosts, the Hollis family. I looked at the calendar. It was booked solid. Every single weekend for the next 3 months was grayed out. The weekdays were spotty, but mostly full. I did the math in my head. At $150 a night, the price listed, and an occupancy rate of roughly 80%. This room was generating nearly $3,000 a month. That was why Madison needed the room. That was why I was on the sofa. I wasn't being displaced by a grieving cousin. I was being displaced by a revenue stream. Madison wasn't staying in my room. She was the property manager. She was likely sleeping in the guest room or even on a blow-up mattress in the attic when guests were there, while selling my room to strangers. I scrolled down to the reviews. The first one was dated 6 weeks ago. Lovely stay. Madison was a communicative host and her aunt and uncle were darling. The room feels full of history. Highly recommend. 6 weeks. They had been doing this for a month and a half. They had been planning this while I was calling them to check in on Sundays. They had been taking photos of my personal space while I was at work in Boston. I clicked through the photo gallery again, fueled by a cold, sharp rage. Photo 1, the bed. Photo 2, the view of the garden. Photo 3, the desk area. I paused on photo 3. The desk was set up to look inviting to a business traveler. There was a lamp, a notepad, and a decorative stack of books. But something about the decorative arrangement bothered me. Under the lamp, partially obscured by a fake succulent plant, was a piece of paper. It looked like it had been left there by mistake during the staging, or perhaps it was meant to look like a writer's desk aesthetic. I zoomed in. The resolution of the image was high. Madison had used a good camera. The writing on the paper was cursive, spidery, elegant, old-fashioned script. I knew that handwriting. I had spent my childhood trying to copy it. It was my grandmother's handwriting. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting until my eyes watered. I could make out the header and the first few lines, though they were upside down in the photo. My dearest Tessa, if you are reading this, I am gone, but I want you to know that this house— I slammed the laptop lid shut, gasping for air. That wasn't just a prop. That was the letter. The letter my grandmother had told me she would write. The letter my parents swore never existed. They told me she had died without a final note. They told me the will was standard, everything to them. But there it was, sitting on my desk, used as a background prop to sell my bedroom to a stranger for $150 a night. They hadn't just stolen the room. They had stolen the truth. I grabbed my car keys. The sadness was gone. The shock was gone. I wasn't going back to apologize. I wasn't going back to sleep on the sofa. I was going back to burn their little business to the ground. Starting with that piece of paper, they thought I left because of hurt feelings. They had no idea I was about to return with a warrant written in my grandmother's ink. The rage I felt sitting in my car was volcanic, hot enough to burn down the entire meticulously manicured neighborhood. I wanted to kick down the front door, march up the stairs, and rip the letter from under that fake succulent plant. I wanted to scream at my parents until they finally heard me, but I didn't. I forced my hands to uncurl from the steering wheel. I forced my breathing to slow. If I went in there now, screaming about a letter I saw in a photo, they would gaslight me. They would say I was hallucinating, or worse, they would destroy the physical evidence before I could touch it. My father would say I was being hysterical. My mother would cry about how I was ruining the family image. And Madison? Madison would just smile that tight, victimized smile and play the innocent cousin caught in the crossfire. No, I needed something colder than anger. I needed proof that would hold up in a courtroom, not just a living room. I called Cole. "Do not go back inside," he said immediately, his lawyer instincts kicking in before I even finished describing the letter in the photo. "If that is really your grandmother's missing letter, and they are using it as a prop, they have crossed a line from insensitivity into moral bankruptcy. But we need to prove the legal bankruptcy. We need to prove they are intercepting your mail." "So what do?" I asked, staring at the house through my windshield. "We set a trap," Cole said. "A bait package. Something that requires a chain of custody." I drove to the nearest shipping center, a 20-minute drive that gave me time to formulate the specifics. I bought a rigid cardboard document mailer, the kind used for contracts or legal notices. It looked official. It looked urgent. Inside. I placed a stack of blank printer paper, enough to give it weight and thickness. I addressed it to Tessa Hollis at my parents' address. I slapped a confidential sticker on the front. Then I paid $50 for same-day local courier delivery. The clerk looked at me. "You want signature required?" "Strictly," I said. "Adult signature only, and I need the tracking update sent to my phone immediately." I went back to the hotel room to wait. It was the longest 3 hours of my life. I sat on the edge of the bed with my laptop open, refreshing the courier's tracking page every 30 seconds. At 2:15 in the afternoon, my phone pinged. Status, delivered, signed by M. Vale. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. Madison. She had signed for a package clearly marked confidential and addressed to Tessa Hollis. She hadn't rejected it. She hadn't told the courier that Tessa Hollis didn't live there. She had accepted it. Now came the second part of the test. I waited 10 minutes, then 20, then an hour. If my parents were acting as responsible mail drops, or if Madison was just collecting mail to be helpful, I should have received a text or a call. "Hey Tessa, a package came for you." My phone remained silent. 2 hours passed, nothing. She had kept it, just like she had kept the bank notices, just like she had kept the grandmother's letter. She had taken possession of my property with no intention of telling me. I called Cole back. "We have her." I said, "She signed for it." And total radio silence on their end. "That is theft," Cole said flatly. "Federal mail theft is a felony. But since it was a private courier, it is theft of property and interference with correspondence. It establishes a pattern. Now, look at the money. Tessa, follow the money." I turned back to the financial records I had pulled the night before. The mortgage modification kept nagging at me. My parents were financially conservative. They didn't take risks. So why cash out $85,000 of equity? I lined up the dates on a spreadsheet. October 14th. Madison's husband files for divorce in Florida. October 16th. Madison arrives in New Haven with 3 suitcases. October 20th. My parents apply for the cash-out refinance. November 2nd. The funds are disbursed to my father's primary checking account. I looked at the disbursement date, November 2nd. Then I looked at the formation date of Juniper Lane Holdings, LLC, November 4th. It was a direct pipeline. My parents had drained the equity from their home, my childhood home, my future inheritance, to bankroll Madison's business venture. They gave her the capital to start the LLC. But why? Why would they give her nearly $100,000 when they wouldn't even lend me $500 for my first car? I dug deeper into the LLC filing. I had noticed the registered agent was a Sarah Miller, likely a friend of Madison's to keep her name off the public face of the company. But every LLC filing requires a contact email for the state to send tax notices to. I had missed it the first time because I was looking for Madison's name. This time, I looked for patterns. The contact email was lhollis78@gmail.com. My mother, Lorraine Hollis, born in 1978. My stomach turned. This wasn't just Madison manipulating my elderly parents. My mother was the administrative contact. She was in on it. She wasn't a victim of a mooching niece. She was a partner. I cross-referenced the bank accounts again. I had access to a joint family account that my father had put me on years ago for emergencies. Though I had never touched it, I logged in, praying they hadn't revoked my access yet. They hadn't. They were sloppy. I scrolled through the transaction history. On November 5th, there was a wire transfer of $40,000 to an account ending in 4421. I didn't recognize the account, but the memo line read, "Startup costs, renovations." Renovations, the kitchen remodel my mother had lied about. They hadn't renovated the kitchen. They had used that money to stage my bedroom, buy the high-end linens, install the smart locks, and set up the enterprise Wi-Fi. They had used my inheritance to erase me from my own room and turn it into a hotel suite. "Cole," I said, my voice shaking with a cold fury. "They financed it. My parents paid for the takeover." "It is worse than that." "Tessa," Cole said, "look at the liability. If that LLC gets sued, say a guest gets hurt, who is on the hook? The house is the registered address. Your parents' assets are the collateral. Madison has nothing. She is using them as a shield." "And they are letting her," I whispered. I continued to click through the cloud drive associated with the family email. My father used a simple cloud storage service to keep digital copies of tax returns and deeds. I knew the password because it was the same one he used for Netflix. I navigated to a folder labeled Scans. Most of it was mundane: receipts for appliance repairs, vet bills for a dog that died 5 years ago. But there was a new file, created 3 weeks ago, authorization signed, PDF. I clicked it. The document opened on my screen. It was a general power of attorney. I, Tessa Hollis, residing at, hereby appoint Grant Hollis as my attorney-in-fact. It gave him the power to manage real estate, banking, and legal claims in my name. I scrolled to the bottom. There was my signature, the loop of the T, the sharp H. It was dated November 1st. I checked my calendar for November 1st. I was in Boston, presenting a compliance audit to a board of directors. I had 5 witnesses and a time-stamped building entry card to prove it. I had never signed this. I stared at the pixelated ink. They hadn't just forged my signature on the LLC application. They had created a blanket legal document to control me. Why? Why did they need a power of attorney? Then it hit me. The trust. My grandmother's trust. The only thing I had that they couldn't touch was the trust fund my grandmother had left for me, which was supposed to distribute a lump sum when I turned 35, next year. But the trustee had discretion to release funds earlier for housing or emergency medical needs. If my father had a power of attorney, he could petition the trustee in my name. He could claim I was in distress. He could claim I needed the money for a house or a renovation. They were going to drain my trust fund to pay back the loan they took out for Madison. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to put the laptop down. This wasn't just a dysfunctional family. This was a criminal enterprise operating out of a suburban colonial. I picked up the phone. Cole? Yeah, I am here. I found a power of attorney, I said, my voice sounding hollow to my own ears. They forged my signature. I think they are going after the trust fund. There was a silence on the line, a long, heavy silence. When Cole spoke again, his voice was no longer that of a fiancé. It was the voice of a prosecutor. That is 20 years in prison. Tessa, that is wire fraud, identity theft, and forgery. I know, I said. Do not confront them yet, Cole commanded. We have the digital copy. We need the original. If you walk in there now, they will burn it. You need to get that piece of paper. I looked at the screen, at the fake signature that was designed to steal my future. I know where it is, I said. It is in the blue file folder under the bed, the one Madison tried to hide. Then you need to go back, Cole said, but not as a daughter. You go back as a customer. What do you mean? You said the room is booked on the app?
Yeah.
Book it, Cole said. Use a fake name. Use a prepaid card. Book the room for tonight. Get inside legally. And when you are in there, you check out with everything. I looked at the listing on my screen, the lavender suite. I clicked reserve. The text message from my mother arrived at 4:30 in the afternoon. It was not an apology. It was a summons wrapped in the guise of a peace offering. Dinner is at 6. I made the pot roast you like. Please come home. We need to reset. I stared at the screen in my hotel room. Reset. That was computer terminology for wiping the memory clean and starting over as if the error never occurred. My mother wanted to reboot the family dynamic, deleting the file where they stole my identity and rented out my bedroom. I did not go back because I was hungry. I went back because in every investigation, there comes a moment when you have to sit across from the subjects and let them lie to you, just so you can lock their stories into the record. I needed them to commit to their version of events before I destroyed it. I pulled into the driveway at 5:55. The house was glowing with warm, yellow light, the picture of suburban tranquility. Madison's car was moved to the side, making space for me, a calculated gesture of welcome. When I walked in, the smell of rosemary and roasted garlic hit me, a scent that used to mean safety, but now smelled like a trap. My mother was in the entryway immediately. She looked tired, her makeup applied a little too heavily to cover the stress lines around her eyes. "Tessa," she breathed. Reaching out to touch my arm, I flinched, just slightly, and she pulled back. "I am so glad you came. We just want a nice evening. No fighting, just family." I walked past her into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the Wedgwood plates we usually saved for Thanksgiving. Sitting at the head of the table was my father, Grant, pouring wine, and sitting in my usual spot, to his right, was Madison. She looked up at me with wide, doe-like eyes. She was wearing a soft, oversized sweater, looking for all the world like a fragile bird that had fallen out of a nest. "Hi, Tessa," she said softly. "I really appreciate you coming." I took the seat across from her, the guest seat. "Let's eat," my father said, signaling that the court was in session and he was the judge. The first 20 minutes were a masterclass in denial. My mother talked about the weather. My father talked about the local football team. Madison picked at her food, performing a silent play of distress for an audience of 2. Finally, my mother set down her fork. Her eyes darted between me and Madison. "I just want to say," she began. her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. That I know things got off to a rocky start yesterday, but we are a family, and families make room for each other. Tessa, I know you are independent, and sometimes you forget that not everyone is as strong as you are. Madison is going through a trauma. Trauma, I repeated, slicing a piece of carrot with surgical precision. Is that what we are calling it? My father cleared his throat. Do not start. Tessa, your mother is right. You have a good job. You have your own life. Madison needed a sanctuary. We asked you to make a small sacrifice, sleeping on the sofa, so she could have a space to heal. It is what decent people do. You do not kick family when they are down. I looked at Madison. She was dabbing the corner of her dry eye with a napkin. I am sorry. Tessa, Madison whispered. I didn't mean to displace you. I was just so exhausted. I haven't slept in weeks. I just needed a bed. A real bed. I didn't think you would mind so much. I thought we were close enough for that. It was a perfect performance. If I hadn't seen the shredder, the Ethernet cables, and the bank notices, I might have felt guilty. You just needed a bed, I said, keeping my voice conversational. Just a place to sleep. Yes, she said, nodding. Just a quiet room to gather my thoughts. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I didn't unlock it yet. I just set it on the table, face down, next to my wine glass. That is interesting, I said, because usually, when people need a quiet room to sleep in, they do not list it on the internet for $150 a night. The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't the silence of confusion. It was the silence of a bomb that had just landed on the dinner table, and everyone was watching the fuse burn. Madison stopped chewing. My father's hand froze halfway to his glass. My mother looked at the centerpiece as if it had suddenly grown teeth. I flipped the phone over. I had queued up the listing. The photo of my bedroom, staged, lit, and priced, shone bright on the screen. The Lavender Suite, I read aloud. Hosted by the Hollis family. Superhost status. Booked solid for the next 6 weeks. I looked up. Madison's face had drained of color. I am confused, I said, my voice dropping an octave, becoming the cold, hard voice I used in deposition rooms, if you are sleeping in there because you are so traumatized. Madison, where are the guests sleeping? Or are you sharing the bed with strangers? My father slammed his hand on the table. The silverware rattled. Stop it, he roared. You are snooping. You are invading her privacy. I am invading her privacy? I asked, leaning forward. That is my room. Dad, that is my desk in the photo. Those are my grandma's letters on the desk used as props. Madison recovered first. She let out a shaky, incredulous laugh. Oh my God. Tessa, you are crazy. That is not what you think. My friend Sarah, she was helping me look for apartments. She must have posted that as a draft or something to show me what I could afford. It is a mistake. It is not real. A mistake, I repeated. Yes, Madison insisted, her eyes wide and pleading. Sarah is an idiot. She manages properties. She must have used the photos I sent her of the room just to test a layout. I would never rent out your room. That is insane. I tapped the screen. It has 12 reviews. Madison. The most recent one is from 3 days ago. Lovely stay. Madison was a gracious host. Did your friend Sarah also hallucinate 12 different people staying here and paying money? Madison's mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. My father intervened, his face turning a mottled red. So what? He shouted. So what if we rented it out? We need the money. The heating bill is up. Taxes are up. Madison is helping us manage the costs. You do not help us. Tessa, you come here with your expensive wine and your fancy car and you judge us. We are doing what we have to do to survive. I looked at him. Finally, a sliver of truth. So it is not about Madison's trauma, I said. It is about a business. It is about family survival, Grant yelled. And you are ruining it because you are too selfish to sleep on a couch for a few nights. I stood up. I walked around the table until I was standing directly behind Madison's chair. She stiffened. her shoulders hunching up. Okay, I said, let's say I believe you. Let's say this is just a desperate financial move. That still doesn't explain the mail. I saw Madison's hand twitch, her right hand, resting on the table, curled into a fist. What mail? My mother asked, her voice shrill. I looked down at Madison. The package I sent to myself today, I said, the one addressed to Tessa Hollis, marked confidential. Madison didn't move. It was signed for at 2:15. I said, by M. Vale. I leaned down, bringing my face close to her ear. Where is it, Madison? She flinched away from me. I put it somewhere. I forgot. I was busy. You opened it, didn't you? I asked. Just like you opened my bank statements. Just like you opened the trust fund documents. She slammed her hands on the table and spun around to face me, tears streaming down her face. I am trying to help, she screamed. I am trying to save this house. You do not care about them. You moved away. You left them here to rot in this big old house. I am the one who is here. I am the one who is actually being a daughter. You are not being a daughter, I said coldly. You are being a business partner in a fraud. My father stood up, knocking his chair over. Get out, he bellowed. If you are going to treat your cousin like a criminal, get out of my house. I grabbed my phone from the table. I am leaving, I said, but I want the package, and I want the letter from Grandma that you have on the desk. We do not have any letter, my mother cried out. She was standing now, wringing her hands so hard I thought her fingers would break. Tessa, please, stop this. Just sit down. We can work this out. There is nothing to work out. Mom, I said, you stole my identity. You forged my signature. I did not, Madison shrieked. I looked at her. I have the alert. Madison, I have the IP address. And I have the signature on the LLC filing. My father moved toward me, his chest puffed out. You are bluffing. You are trying to scare us. You have nothing. I have enough to send you all to jail. I said. My mother let out a sob, a loud, ragged sound that stopped my father in his tracks. Grant, stop, she wept. Just stop. She looked at me, her face crumbling. Tessa, please, we didn't mean for it to go this far. We needed the equity, and the bank wouldn't give it to us without proof of income. Madison had the idea for the rental. It was just supposed to be temporary. So you kicked me out, I said. No, my mother protested. No, we didn't kick you out. We needed the room. And then she said it, the sentence that hung in the air like smoke from a gunshot. If you had just agreed to sleep on the sofa, she said, her voice shaking with a twisted logic, none of this would be a problem. You would have been here. You would have been part of the family. We could have just worked around you. I stared at her. The room went dead silent. My father looked away. Madison looked at the floor. There it was, the admission. You didn't want me here, I said softly. You wanted a prop. You wanted me on the sofa so I would look like I belonged. While you sold my actual place in this family to strangers, you needed me to be compliant, so you could hide the fact that you had already replaced me. My mother reached out a hand. Tessa, no. I stepped back. I am not the one who is ruining this family, I said. You did that when you decided my room was worth more than my trust. I turned and walked to the front door. My father didn't try to stop me this time. He just stood there, surrounded by the ruins of his dinner party, looking old and small. As I reached the door, I turned back one last time. I am checking out, I said, for real this time. I walked out into the cold night air. I didn't have the package. I didn't have the letter, but I had something better. I had a confession, and I had a witness. I pulled out my phone and stopped the recording I had started the moment I walked into the house. Save file. Dinner confession. MP3. I got into my car. The trembling started then, the adrenaline crash leaving me shaking. But I gripped the steering wheel. I wasn't done. I had the audio. I had the digital trail. Now I needed the physical smoking gun. I looked up at the window of my old room. The light was on. They thought the fight was over because I had left. They didn't realize I was just going to get the reinforcements. I put the car in gear. Next stop, Cole, then the authorities. But first, I had one more stop to make. The listing said the room was booked for tonight, which meant in a few hours, a guest was going to arrive. And I intended to be the one to greet them, to understand how I nailed the coffin shut on my family's deception. You have to rewind 20 minutes from the moment I walked out the front door. The shouting match at the dinner table was the distraction. The real work happened while they were busy feeling superior. Midway through the appetizer, while Madison was performing her tragic divorcee monologue, I had feigned a coughing fit. "I need some water," I had choked out, waving my hand. "I will get it." "Sit down, Tessa. I will get it." My mother had started to rise, ever the hostess. "No, Mom. Sit. I know where the glasses are." I had slipped into the kitchen, out of their line of sight. The dining room was separated by a swinging door. As soon as it swung shut, I dropped the act. I didn't go to the fridge. I went to the junk drawer next to the oven. In the Hollis household, the junk drawer was sacred. It was where my father kept the spare keys, the batteries, and the mail he did not want to deal with immediately. If there was a paper trail, it would be there. I pulled the handle. It stuck slightly, a familiar snag, before sliding open. My heart was hammering against my ribs. A distinct, hollow thud. I could hear the muffled sounds of their conversation in the next room. I had maybe 60 seconds before my mother came in to check on me. I pushed aside a tangle of rubber bands and takeout menus, and there it was. It wasn't just a loose paper. It was a laminated sheet, punched and ring-bound, looking professionally done. Hollis Home Hosting, guest rules and Wi-Fi access. I pulled my phone out. I didn't just snap a photo. I initiated a video call with Cole. He answered instantly, the feed connecting to his office where he was likely pacing. I showed him the drawer. "Do not take it," Cole whispered through the speaker, his voice tinny but urgent. "If you take it, they can claim you stole property. We need the information, not the object. Treat it like a crime scene. Photograph everything. Leave no trace you were there." I steadied my hand. I flipped the laminated page over. Underneath was a stack of papers clipped together with a black binder clip. The cover page read, "Merchant Agreement, Third-Party Payout Authorization." I snapped a high-resolution photo. I flipped the page. Nightly rate structure. Weekdays, $120. Weekends, $180. Holiday surcharge, 20%. I snapped another. Then I found the keypad codes, a list of 6-digit numbers generated for specific dates. Guest, Smith, code 449201. The lock on the front door wasn't just for safety, it was a turnstile. But the gold mine was on the last page. It was a direct deposit form for the platform payouts. Bank name, Northeast Citizens Bank. Routing number, redacted for privacy. Account ending in 8892. I knew that number. I had memorized it when I was 16 and my father taught me how to balance a checkbook. It was his primary checking account, the one he used for his pension, the one he swore was tight this year due to inflation. I snapped the photo, then carefully slid the papers back under the takeout menus, arranging the rubber bands exactly as they had been. "Tessa?" My mother's voice called from the dining room. "Everything okay?" "Fine." "Mom, just looking for ice," I called back, my voice steady. I grabbed a glass, filled it from the tap, and walked back into the dining room to finish the dinner that would end in my departure. Now, sitting in my hotel room hours after the explosion at dinner, I projected those photos onto the TV screen. The account number was the smoking gun. It proved intent. My parents weren't just helping Madison, they were earning revenue. The money from the room rental, my room, was flowing directly into my father's account. But why? If they were making $3,000 a month, that was decent money. But it wasn't life-changing wealth for people like them, unless the rental income was just the operating cash flow, and the real prize was something bigger. I thought back to the power of attorney I had found earlier. the forged signature. Why do you need a power of attorney over someone if you are already stealing their room? You need it if you want to access assets that are legally protected. My grandmother's trust. The trust was a generation-skipping instrument. My grandmother, having zero faith in my father's ability to not spoil me, had set it up so that I could not touch the principal until I was 35. But there was a clause. I knew it by heart because I had read the bylaws 100 times. Clause 4.2. The trustee may disburse funds prior to the beneficiary attaining the age of 35 for the purposes of purchasing a primary residence, emergency medical care, or substantial home improvements to a property owned by the beneficiary. I didn't own the house in New Haven. My parents did. So how could they use the trust money for the house? Unless... I opened the web portal for the Connecticut Probate Court. Wills and initial trust filings were public record if they had been contested or amended. I searched for Eleanor Hollis Living Trust. There was a recent entry, filed 10 days ago. Status, pending review. Document, petition to amend beneficiary designation. My blood ran cold. I paid the $10 fee to download the docket summary. The petition didn't try to remove me. That would be too obvious. Instead, it was a request to add a secondary beneficiary due to incapacity or unavailability of the primary beneficiary. And there, listed as the proposed secondary beneficiary, was Madison Vale. The justification note was typed in legalese, but the meaning was clear. The primary beneficiary, Tessa Hollis, has demonstrated a lack of contact and unstable residency. The secondary beneficiary, Madison Vale, is currently residing in the ancestral home and providing care for the estate. They were trying to paint me as an absentee, unstable daughter who had abandoned the ancestral home, while Madison was the dutiful keeper of the flame. And if they succeeded, and if they used the forged power of attorney to agree to this change on my behalf, Madison wouldn't just get my room, she would get the trust fund. They were going to use my money to pay off the loan they took to renovate the house for her business. I looked at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. They had monetized my displacement. I picked up my phone and called Cole. It was late, but he answered on the first ring. "Cole," I said, my voice eerily calm. "I found the endgame." "Tell me," he said. "They are not just renting the room. They are trying to rewrite the trust. They filed a petition 10 days ago to add Madison as a beneficiary." I heard the sharp intake of breath on his end. "On what grounds?" "Abandonment," I said. "They are using the fact that I live in Boston and checked out of the family home against me." "And Cole? The account receiving the rental income?" "It is Dad's." "Okay," Cole said, the sound of keyboard clacking filling the line. "This is it. We have the financial fraud, the rental income undeclared to you, the identity theft, the forged signature, and now attempted probate fraud. We have enough to bury them." "Not yet," I said. "Why not?" "Because a petition is just a request," I said, staring at the name Madison Vale on the legal document. "They haven't succeeded yet. If I stop them now, they will just say it was a misunderstanding. They will say they were just updating the paperwork in case something happened to me. They will play dumb. So what do you want to do?" "I want them to admit that Madison isn't just a beneficiary." I said, "I want to prove she is the architect." "How?" I looked at the guest rules photo again. At the bottom, in small print, was a contact email for emergency maintenance. It wasn't my mother's email. It wasn't my father's. It was me, Vale, design@gmail.com. Madison had a design business? Since when? I typed the email into Google. A portfolio site popped up, Madison Vale Interiors. The landing page featured a recent project. I clicked on it. It was a full 3D rendering of my parents' house, but it wasn't the house as it looked now. It was a renovation plan. The Hollis Estate Inn, a boutique experience. The plan didn't just show my room being rented, it showed the whole house. It showed my parents moving into the in-law suite in the basement. It showed walls being knocked down. And the date on the project file? August. 2 months before Madison's sudden divorce. 2 months before she came crying to my mother about needing a place to sleep. She hadn't fled a broken marriage. She had arrived to execute a business plan. I have her. I told Cole. She planned this. She planned the divorce. She planned the move. And she planned the takeover. It is premeditated. Tessa, Cole warned, be careful. I am done being careful. I said, I am going to finish this. I closed the laptop. The pieces were all there. The contract in the drawer was the nail. The probate filing was the hammer. And I was about to swing it. I sat at the small desk in my hotel room, the ergonomic chair offering more support than my parents ever had. It was 8 a.m. I had not slept. But I was not tired. I was operating on the cold, high-octane fuel of clarity. I did not send a text. I did not call. I opened my laptop and drafted an email. To Grant Hollis, Lorraine Hollis, CC, Cole Mercer, Esquire. Subject, Notice of demand regarding unauthorized use of identity and property. I did not write Dear Mom and Dad. I wrote their names. The body of the email was not emotional. It was a bulleted list of requirements, drafted with the precision of a forensic audit. 1. Immediate surrender of all original identification documents, trust fund records, and the unauthorized power of attorney currently in your possession. 2. Immediate cessation of all commercial activity operating under the name Hollis Home Hosting or any affiliated LLC using my name or credentials. 3. A full accounting of all revenue generated from the rental of the room commonly known as the Lavender Suite, dating back to the first listing. 4. A copy of the mortgage modification agreement involving the withdrawal of equity from the primary residence. I hit send. The reaction was almost immediate. My phone rang 4 minutes later. It was my father. I let it go to voicemail. He called again. I declined it. Then came the text from my mother. Tessa, are you insane? You are threatening your own parents? This is cruel. We are family. You are breaking my heart. I didn't reply. I wasn't breaking her heart. I was breaking her business model. 10 minutes later, a notification popped up on my personal Instagram. I didn't follow Madison, but her profile was public. She had just posted a story. It was a black screen with white text, the font jagged and edgy. Some people are energy vampires. They leave for years and then come back just to destroy the peace you built. Toxic family is still toxic. Healing boundaries, surviving. I took a screenshot. It would go into the file under character evidence. My father's voicemail transcribed on my screen. Tessa, pick up the phone. You do not send emails like that to your father. You are blowing this out of proportion. We need to talk, now. I forwarded the voicemail to Cole. What is the next move? I typed. Cole replied instantly. The preservation letter is out. They just got it via courier. Now they know we are not bluffing. The preservation letter was a legal masterstroke. It was a formal notice demanding that they preserve all digital and physical evidence. Emails, text messages, booking logs, bank statements. It warned them that deleting anything from this point forward would be considered spoliation of evidence, which carries severe legal penalties. It was the legal equivalent of freezing the crime scene. At 11 a.m, my father texted again. The tone had shifted. The bluster was gone, replaced by a frantic urgency. Meet us, not at the house, the coffee shop on Elm Street, noon, please, just us. I agreed, but I wasn't going alone. I had Cole on an open line, his phone listening in from my purse. I arrived at the coffee shop 5 minutes early. I chose a table in the back corner, visible to the cameras but secluded enough for conversation. I ordered a black coffee and waited. They walked in at noon exactly. My father looked 10 years older than he had at dinner the night before. His golf polo was wrinkled. My mother was wearing large sunglasses indoors, likely to hide swollen eyes. Madison was trailing behind them, her arms crossed, wearing a hoodie that looked expensive but performative. They sat down. Madison pulled a chair up loudly, scraping the legs against the floor. We got the letter, my father said, skipping the pleasantries. The one from the lawyer. Good, I said. Tessa, my mother started, her voice wavering. Why are you doing this? We can fix this. We do not need lawyers. Lawyers just take money. I took a sip of my coffee. You stole my identity. Mom, you forged my signature on a federal tax document. You are trying to alter a trust fund. We are way past fixing this over a Sunday roast. We didn't steal anything, Madison snapped. We borrowed your name because you weren't using it. You have great credit. Mine is recovering. We were going to take your name off the LLC as soon as the business stabilized. And the power of attorney? I asked, shifting my gaze to her. Was that also temporary? Or were you planning to keep control of my assets until the trust fund was drained? My father placed his hands on the table. They were shaking. Look, Tessa, he said, his voice low. We made a mistake. We cut corners. We were desperate. The house costs a fortune to heat. The pension isn't stretching far enough. Madison had this idea, and it started making money. We got carried away. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a checkbook. We want to make a deal, he said. I watched him write. He tore the check out and slid it across the table. I looked at the number. $10,000. What is this? I asked. It is a gift, my mother said eagerly. For your wedding. For you and Cole. We know we haven't been supportive enough. We want you to have this. Just drop the email. Drop the lawyer. Let's go back to normal. I looked at the check. Then I looked at my father. Where did this money come from, Dad? He blinked. What does it matter? It is money. It is valid. Is it from the room rental revenue? I asked. Or is it from the $85,000 you cashed out of the house equity? He froze. His jaw worked, but no sound came out. If it is from the rental, it is my money because it was earned using my room and my identity. I said, my voice flat. If it is from the refinance, it is debt that you secured against the inheritance you are actively trying to divert to Madison. I slid the check back to him. I do not want your money. I want the truth, and I want everything back. Madison scoffed. You are so arrogant. You think you are better than us because you work in a high-rise. You do not know what it is like to struggle. I know what it is like to be used, I countered. Cole's voice came through my earpiece, audible only to me, but I repeated his words for them. Here are the options. I said, Option A, you voluntarily dissolve the LLC. You provide a full forensic accounting of every dollar earned. You rescind the petition to the probate court immediately, and you sign a sworn affidavit admitting to the forgery. If you do that, I will not file a police report. And Option B? My father asked, his face gray. Option B is a civil lawsuit for fraud, identity theft, and conversion of property. I said, and I will hand the file over to the district attorney. Forgery is a felony. Dad, so is mail theft. My mother gasped, clutching her chest. You wouldn't put your father in jail. You put yourselves in this position, I said, not me. Lorraine began to cry, the tears slipping out from under her dark glasses. Please, Tessa, think about the family name, the neighbors. If the police come to the house, we will be ruined. Do not make me lose face like this. I felt a flash of the old guilt, the childhood programming trying to override the adult logic, but then I looked at Madison. She wasn't crying. She was glaring at me with a hatred so pure it was almost impressive. You made me lose face when you told me to sleep on the sofa so you could sell my bedroom to a stranger. I said to my mother, you made me lose face when you let your niece steal my grandmother's letters to use as props. That is when it happened. The crack in the dam. Madison slammed her hand on the table. They weren't your letters, she shouted, her voice rising so loud that the barista turned to look. I turned to her. Excuse me? They weren't just yours, she hissed. Grandma didn't leave that room to you. She didn't leave the house to you. She left it to the family, to all of us. I stayed very still. The bait had been taken. Grandma left a specific will. Madison, I said calmly, and she left a specific letter to me, the one you have on the desk in the photo. That letter doesn't say what you think it says, Madison blurted out. My father reached out to grab her arm. Madison, shut up. No! She pulled away. She thinks she is so special. She thinks Grandma loved her best. But she is wrong. That room. Grandma wanted it to be used. She wanted the house to be alive, not a museum for Tessa's high school trophies. So you read the letter? I asked. Madison sneered. Yeah, I read it, before I put it in the shredder. The air left the table. My mother stopped crying. My father closed his eyes. Madison realized what she had said a second too late. Her hand flew to her mouth. You shredded it? I asked. The volume of my voice dropped to a whisper. I didn't mean, Madison stammered. It was just old paper. It was clutter. You admitted to destroying a testamentary document, I said, and you just did it in front of witnesses. I pointed to my purse. My lawyer is on the line, Madison. He heard that. Madison's face went from red to white in the span of a heartbeat. She looked at Grant. Uncle Grant, I didn't. My father looked at me. There was no fight left in him. He looked at the check on the table, then at his niece, then at me. We will sign, he whispered. Sign what? Madison shrieked. You cannot sign. We are building something. It is over. Madison, my father said, his voice breaking. But I wasn't done. Madison's slip, that she had read the letter before destroying it, triggered something in my memory. The photo, the listing photo. Wait, I said. I pulled up the photo on my phone again. I zoomed in on the prop letter on the desk. You said you shredded it, I said, but this photo was taken 3 days ago for the listing update. So? Madison challenged, though her voice was shaky. So, I said, looking closely at the pixelated image, if you shredded the original, then what is this? I looked at the ink. It was too dark, too uniform. It is a photocopy, I realized aloud. You didn't just find the letter, I said, looking up at her. You made copies. Why? Madison stayed silent, her eyes darting to the side. Because there is something in there you needed, I said. Something you couldn't destroy because you needed to reference it, or... I looked at my father. Or because you needed to practice the handwriting. My father flinched. That is how you forged the power of attorney. I said, you didn't just trace my signature. You used Grandma's handwriting style to forge the witness lines on the other documents. You kept the letter as a sample key. I stood up. I am coming to the house, I said. Not to sleep, not to eat. I am coming to get the copy of that letter. And if it is not in the desk where you left it in the photo, I am calling the police right now and reporting the destruction of a will. My father stood up too. He looked defeated. Come on, he said to Madison. Let's go. Madison looked at me, her eyes wet with rage. You are ruining everything. I smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I had felt in 48 hours. I am not ruining it. Madison, I am just auditing it, and you failed. The location I chose for the final confrontation was deliberate. I did not pick the cozy coffee shop on Elm Street where we had met previously. Instead, I selected a sterile, glass-walled cafe in the lobby of the building adjacent to the county courthouse. It was a place teeming with paralegals, city clerks, and people in suits discussing settlements. It was a place where emotional outbursts were unprofessional and where the threat of legal action hung heavy in the air, physically tangible. My parents and Madison arrived 10 minutes late. They looked like a triumvirate of the condemned. My father, Grant, was pale, his eyes darting around the room as if expecting a police squad to jump out from behind the espresso machine. My mother, Lorraine, was clinging to her handbag with white-knuckled desperation. Madison, however, walked in with a defiance that was brittle. She wore dark sunglasses and kept her chin high, but I noticed the tremor in her hands when she pulled out her chair. I did not stand up to greet them. I did not order them coffee. On the table in front of me lay a thick manila folder. It was closed. Sit down, I said. They sat. I opened the folder. I did not speak. I simply began to deal the documents like tarot cards, placing them face up on the metal table between us. First, the timeline, a spreadsheet color-coded to show the exact correlation between Madison's arrival, the mortgage refinance, and the creation of the LLC. Second, the listing photos, the high-resolution shots of my bedroom, staged with my grandmother's letters. Third, the courier receipt, the signature of M. Vale accepting the package addressed to Tessa Hollis. Fourth, the hosting contract I had photographed from the kitchen drawer. And finally, in the center, the printout of the power of attorney with the forged signature. I folded my hands on top of the pile. "This is not a family meeting," I said, my voice low and devoid of any warmth. "This is a pre-indictment hearing. You have 30 minutes to convince me not to walk next door to the district attorney's office and file charges for felony fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy." My father looked at the papers. He reached out to touch the power of attorney, but I slapped his hand away. "Do not touch the evidence," I said. "Tessa," Grant began, his voice raspy, "you are constructing a narrative that isn't there. You are speculating. We signed some papers to manage the property. Yes, but the power of attorney? We never used that. It was a draft, a contingency in case you got sick or were incapacitated. We were looking out for you." "Looking out for me," I repeated, "by forging my signature on a document that gives you control over my finances while I am perfectly healthy and living 2 states away? It is not a forgery." He bluffed, though sweat was beading on his upper lip. "You might have signed it during a visit and forgotten. You are busy. You sign things all the time." I stared at him. The audacity was almost impressive. "I expected you to say that," I said. I reached into my bag and pulled out a tablet. I tapped the screen and turned it toward them. The video played. It was grainy but clear enough. It was footage from the security camera of the office building directly across the street from my parents' house. I had purchased the footage that morning from the building's security firm, a perfectly legal transaction for a private investigator. The timestamp was from yesterday afternoon, 2:15. The video showed a courier van pulling up. The driver walked to the door. The door opened. Madison stepped out. She took the package, the bright red rigid mailer I had sent. She signed the digital pad. She took the package inside. I paused the video. Then I swiped to the next image, a zoomed-in still of the signature pad, which the courier company had provided as part of the delivery confirmation. M. Vale. And then I played the audio clip I had recorded at dinner the night before. Madison's voice, shrill and clear, cut through the noise of the cafe. I read it before I put it in the shredder. I stopped the recording. "I have you on video accepting mail addressed to me." I said, "I have you on audio admitting to destroying legal documents. And I have a forensic handwriting expert standing by to testify that the signature on that power of attorney matches the handwriting on the hosting guest book, not mine." Grant slumped back in his chair. The fight went out of him like air leaving a punctured tire. My mother let out a low moan and put her face in her hands. "We just wanted to help her." Lorraine sobbed, her voice muffled. "She is your cousin, Tessa. She had nothing. Her husband left her with debt. We just wanted to help her get back on her feet. We didn't want to hurt you. We thought you wouldn't notice. You have so much. You are so successful. Why would you care about an old room and some papers?" "Because it is mine." "Mom," I said. Cole's voice came through the speakerphone of my mobile, which was sitting on the table. "Lorraine, this is Cole. I need you to answer one question very carefully. Who directed the creation of the power of attorney? Was it Grant or was it Madison?" My mother looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked at Madison. Madison stared straight ahead, her jaw set. She did not say a word. "It was Madison, wasn't it?" I said. "She needed the capital to expand the business. The $85,000 from the house wasn't enough. She wanted the trust fund." Madison finally turned to look at me. Her expression wasn't guilt, it was annoyance. "You are obsessed with that money," she spat. "It is just sitting there. Grandma is dead. She does not care who uses it." "She cared," I said. I pulled one last piece of paper from my folder. It wasn't a legal document. It was a photocopy of the letter Madison had tried to hide, the one she had used as a prop. "You said you read it," I said to Madison, "but I do not think you understood it." I began to read aloud. "My dearest Tessa, I am leaving this room to you, not just as a space, but as a thank you. When the cancer got bad, and your father was too busy with golf, and your mother was too busy with her garden club, you were the one who came every weekend. You were the one who slept in the chair next to my bed. You were the one who changed my oxygen. This house is full of people who want things from me. You were the only one who just wanted to be with me. That is why I am carving out this portion of the trust specifically for you, to ensure you always have a home, even if this family forgets how to be one." I looked up. My mother's face was ashen. She had prided herself for years on the narrative that she was the dutiful daughter who cared for her dying mother. She had told everyone at church how hard she had worked. This letter, in her mother's own hand, destroyed that lie completely. "She didn't write that," Lorraine whispered. "She wouldn't say that about me." "She did," I said, "and Madison knew it. That is why she shredded the original. Not because it was clutter, but because it exposed all of you." The silence at the table was heavy, suffocating. The people at the next table had stopped talking and were blatantly listening. I slid a single sheet of paper toward my father. "This is the settlement," I said. He looked at it, his hands shaking so badly he could barely hold the paper. "1. I said, you return every single document you took from my room. 2. You immediately delist the property from all hosting platforms. 3. You dissolve the LLC. 4. You repay every cent of profit earned from that room into the trust account. And 5. You sign this affidavit stating that the power of attorney was unauthorized and that no further copies exist." "And if we do not?" Grant asked weakly. "Then I play the recording for the probate judge," I said, "and I give the video footage to the police, and I sue you for the $85,000 you drained from the home equity, forcing a sale of the house to pay me back." My mother gasped. "You would sell the house?" "I will do whatever I have to do to get my equity back." I said, "You treated this house like a business asset. I am just doing the same." Grant picked up the pen. He looked at Madison, then at Lorraine. He realized he had no leverage. He was a man who cared about reputation above all else, and I was holding a grenade that could blow his reputation to pieces. He signed. He pushed the paper to Lorraine. She wept, but she signed. Then I looked at Madison. "You too," I said. "You are the manager of the LLC. Sign it." Madison didn't move. She stared at the paper, her breathing becoming rapid and shallow. She looked like a trapped animal. "I am not signing that," she hissed. "You have to." "Madison," my father said, his voice defeated. "It is over." "It is not over," she screamed, slamming her fist onto the table. The noise made the barista drop a cup. Madison stood up, her chair screeching backward. "I earned that money," she yelled, her face contorted with a mixture of greed and panic. "I did the work. I staged the room. I managed the bookings. You people just sat around while I turned this dusty old museum into something profitable." "Profitable for whom?" I asked quietly. "For the family? Or for you?" "For me!" she shrieked, losing all control. "I deserve it. My husband took everything. I needed a safety net." And then, in her blind fury, she made the mistake that ended her. "You think you can just take the money back?" She laughed, a manic, high-pitched sound. "You are too late. Tessa, you think the money is in Uncle Grant's account? You think I am stupid enough to leave it there?" Grant looked up, confused. "Madison, what are you talking about?" "The deposits go to my checking account. I saw the statements." Madison sneered at him. "You saw the operating account, you old fool. I set up a sweep. Every night at midnight, anything over $500 gets transferred out." "Transferred where?" Cole's voice cut in sharp from the phone speaker. Madison looked at the phone, then at me. Her eyes were wild. "To the Sovereign Shelley account," she blurted out, naming a digital banking platform known for its anonymity. "The transfer for the last month's bookings, all $12,000, is already pending. It clears at 2 o'clock today. You cannot touch it." The table went silent. My father's face turned a color I had never seen before, a mix of purple and gray. You stole the money from me?" Grant whispered. "I didn't steal it," Madison yelled. "I managed it. I was going to give you your share later." I looked at my watch. It was 1:45. "Cole, did you get that?" I asked. Loud and clear. Cole said, "Sovereign Shelley Bank. Pending transfer. I am calling the fraud department at Northeast Citizens Bank right now. We have 15 minutes to put a freeze on the originating account before that sweep executes." Madison's eyes widened. She realized what she had done. She had just admitted to wire fraud, not just against me, but against her own partner, my father. She scrambled for her phone, her fingers flying across the screen, likely trying to force the transfer through or move the money again. "I wouldn't do that," I said. She ignored me. She tapped frantically. Then she froze. She stared at her screen. "It says, 'Account locked,'" she whispered. I smiled. "I called the bank an hour ago. Madison, as soon as Dad admitted the account number at the coffee shop meeting, I flagged it for suspicious activity involving a stolen identity. They froze it pending verification." I leaned forward. "I knew you were stealing from them. I just needed you to say it out loud so they would finally believe me." Madison looked at my parents. My father was looking at her not with love or pity, but with the cold, hard realization that he had been played for a fool. "You stole from us," Grant said, his voice shaking with rage. "We gave you a home. We gave you my office. And you were siphoning the money?" Madison backed away from the table. I can explain." "No," I said, standing up. "You can't." I picked up the signed affidavit. "I have what I came for." I said to my parents, "You have a mess to clean up. And Madison?" She looked at me, terror finally replacing the arrogance. "Checkout time is 11 a.m., I said. "I suggest you start packing." The conference room at the offices of Sterling and Vance, the firm that managed the administrative arm of my grandmother's trust, was a stark contrast to my parents' cluttered, emotionally suffocating dining room. Here, the walls were glass, the table was mahogany, and the air conditioning was set to a brisk 68 degrees. It was a climate designed for facts, not feelings. We were all there, my parents, Lorraine and Grant, sat on one side, looking like children called to the principal's office. Madison sat next to them, her arms crossed, staring at a spot on the wall with sullen defiance. On the other side sat me, Cole, and Mr. Henderson, the senior trust officer, along with an independent attorney appointed to verify the integrity of the file. The meeting did not start with pleasantries. It started with a signature. Mr. Henderson slid a piece of paper across the table toward Madison. It was a blank sheet of heavy bond paper. "Ms. Vale," Henderson said, his voice dry and devoid of judgment. "As part of our standard verification process regarding the contested power of attorney, we require a signature exemplar. Please sign Tessa Hollis's name 3 times." Madison scoffed. "This is ridiculous. I already told you I didn't sign it." "Then you have nothing to worry about," the independent attorney said. "If your natural hand doesn't match the microscopic pressure points and stroke patterns of the forgery, you are cleared. If you refuse, we proceed with the assumption of guilt based on the digital evidence already provided by Ms. Hollis." Madison picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking. She signed once, twice, 3 times. She shoved the paper back. The attorney took it, placed it under a magnifying loupe, and compared it to the forged power of attorney document I had provided. The silence in the room stretched for 2 agonizing minutes. He looked up. "The loop on the T and the hesitation mark on the S are identical," he stated flatly. "It is a match. The author of the power of attorney is Madison Vale." My father closed his eyes. My mother let out a small, strangled sound. "Mr. Henderson folded his hands. "This constitutes an attempt to defraud a federally regulated trust," he said. "Under normal circumstances, we would refer this immediately to the authorities. However, Ms. Hollis has proposed a cure that avoids a criminal filing. provided all parties agree to the terms right now. He slid a stack of documents toward my father. "Grant," I said, speaking for the first time, "the days of you playing the benevolent patriarch are over." I pointed to the first document. "This is a confession of judgment," I explained. "It states that you knowingly allowed your bank account to be used to launder funds obtained through the unauthorized commercial use of my identity and my room. You are admitting that the money, all $12,000 of it, was not a gift, but misappropriated revenue." "I didn't know she was stealing the rest," Grant protested, his voice weak. "But you knew the source was the room," I countered. "You knew I was on the sofa so you could cash the checks. Sign it." He looked at the document. It also contained a clause permanently removing him as a potential trustee or advisor on my grandmother's estate. He was losing his power over me, legally and financially, forever. He signed. His signature was shaky, a shadow of the bold autograph he used to put on my report cards. Next, I turned to my mother. Lorraine looked at me, her eyes pleading, "Tessa, please, do not make me do this." I slid a single sheet of paper toward her. It was a notarized apology. "I am not asking you to say you love me, Mom," I said softly. "I am asking you to admit what you did. You value your reputation more than your daughter. So, let's put the truth on the record." The letter was simple. It admitted that she had coerced me into sleeping on the sofa under false pretenses, that she had facilitated the invasion of my privacy, and that she had allowed Madison to access and destroy my personal property. "If you sign this," I said, "I won't post the video of Madison stealing my mail on the neighborhood Facebook group. Your reputation stays intact, as long as this file stays closed." She cried as she picked up the pen. It was a pathetic, sniffling sound, but she signed. She stamped her name on the reality of her failure as a mother. Finally, I turned to Madison. "Mr. Henderson spoke for me. Ms. Vale, you are hereby permanently barred from any future beneficiary status in the Eleanor Hollis Trust. Furthermore, the repayment of the $12,000 you attempted to sweep to your offshore account is due within 30 days. If it is not paid, we will garnish your future wages." Madison glared at me. "I do not have that kind of money." "Then you better start working," I said. "Real work, not scamming your family." "And one more thing," I added. I slid a notice to quit across the table. "My parents own the house, but the trust holds the mortgage note due to the original loan Grandma made them years ago. As the primary beneficiary of that note, I am enforcing the occupancy clause. No non-family tenants." Madison looked at Grant. "Uncle Grant?" He didn't look at her. He looked at his hands. "You have 24 hours. Madison," Grant whispered, "you have to go." She stood up, her chair clattering backward. "You are all crazy. I was the only one trying to save this family." "You weren't saving it, Madison," I said calmly. "You were selling it." She stormed out of the glass room. The silence she left behind was heavy, but it was clean. It was the silence of a surgery that was finished. The tumor was gone. 2 hours later, I pulled my Audi into the driveway of my childhood home for the last time. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the manicured lawn. I didn't bring my suitcase. I wasn't staying. I walked in. The house was quiet. My parents were there, sitting in the living room, but they didn't speak as I entered. They looked like ghosts haunting their own life. I walked past them and went upstairs. The door to my room was open. Madison had already begun to pack. Chaotic piles of clothes were strewn everywhere, the lavender suite dismantled in a frenzy of rage. I didn't step fully inside. I didn't need to. I saw the box, the real keepsake box, sitting on the dresser where she had abandoned it. I walked over, picked it up, and checked the contents. The pearl brooch was there. The few surviving letters were there. I closed the box and tucked it under my arm. I turned to leave. I didn't look at the bed where strangers had slept. I didn't look at the desk where my grandmother's love had been used as a prop. I felt nothing for this room anymore. It was just drywall and paint. I walked back downstairs. My parents were still sitting in the living room. My mother looked up as I reached the bottom of the stairs. "Tessa?" she asked, her voice trembling. Are you going to stay for dinner?" I looked at her. The question was so absurd, so perfectly indicative of her inability to grasp reality, that I almost laughed. "No." "Mom," I said. I walked to the door, but before I left, I stopped. I looked at the beige, L-shaped sofa in the living room. The cushions were sagging slightly. It looked old. It looked uncomfortable. For a moment, I remembered the humiliation of that first night, standing there with my suitcase, being told I wasn't enough to warrant a bed. I remembered the feeling of being small, of being secondary, of being the one who had to bend so they wouldn't break. But looking at it now, I didn't feel small. I felt immense. I turned to my parents. "You know," I said, my voice clear and steady in the quiet house, "I should thank you." My father looked up, confused. For what? I pointed to the couch. "For making me sleep there." They stared at me, uncomprehending. "If you hadn't done that," I continued, "I might have spent the rest of my life trying to earn your love. I might have kept coming back here, bringing expensive wine, hoping that one day you would actually see me." I gripped the handle of my keepsake box tighter. "But that couch? It didn't make me small. Dad, it just woke me up." I opened the front door. The cool evening air rushed in, smelling of freedom and gasoline. "I checked out," I said. I stepped out and closed the door behind me. I didn't slam it. I just clicked it shut. Cole was waiting in the car, the engine idling. He saw me coming and leaned over to open the passenger door. "You get everything?" he asked as I slid into the leather seat. I placed the box on my lap and looked at the house one last time. The lights were on, but the hold was gone. "Yeah," I said, smiling at him. "I got everything." I reached over and took his hand. "Let's go home. Cole, our home." He put the car in drive, and we pulled away from the curb. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I watched the road ahead, stretching out under the streetlights, leading back to Boston, back to my life, back to a place where I would never, ever have to sleep on the sofa again. Thank you so much for listening to this story on Lila Revenge Stories. I would love to hear from you in the comments below. So please let me know where you are listening from and what you would have done if you were in Tessa's shoes. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people who need a reminder that sometimes checking out is the strongest move you can make.